Okay, Evan, let's go ahead and take a look at the second video from a different angle, like I said before, to see if kind of point out some things we saw maybe in the first video, slightly different in view, but also some things we may be able to identify from this angle as well. Okay. So again, we talked about, obviously you have a pretty closed, setup as far as the front foot here. It gets time, again, I'm not saying, change it, just be mindful, making sure that there's no issues that come up because of that. A lot of times, we always say every action has a reaction, so sometimes counter-rotating or closing sometimes will lead to more of an opposite movement pattern, but I don't think it's a major issue now. It's just something to keep in the back of your mind in case you feel like it would somehow create any adverse effects as far as your delivery. So same thing we mentioned before, your eyes are kind of down as you're lifting your leg. That's something just maybe to think about. As you see right now, the leg is at the highest point, starting to go down. So the opportunity, from a different viewpoint as far as where we are with our hips, getting those going earlier, just to get that center mass, belly button, hip area, starting to really drive towards our catcher, so we can again get more momentum, build up more energy, we can transfer correctly, and just help the sequencing as far as where some other things fall in place later within our delivery. One thing we see a lot also, and I think a lot of it goes back to kind of someone around your age group, because there's also something as far as you still building strength and everything, is that a lot of our guys get what we call kind of quad dominant. And that means you see this front knee starting to get over top of the the back ankle, and everything really starts to get into really where the quad is taking up a lot of the force as far as that. So one thing to think about is when we start to really move forward, is how the hips can kind of maybe release a little bit more, so that this knee stays a little bit more in a position of over top of the ankle, as we start to drive forward, rather than, as you see, going this way. It's just not as strong of a position using our legs. Think about it. When we start releasing our hips a little bit and getting more into that other position, we're now utilizing our hamstrings, our glutes, still the quads, but not as dominant as in this particular angle and pattern. So we're going to be using more of our backside, our legs, and just more strength, obviously, behind how we can use that as far as driving, developing force. So one thing we see here is just that elevation, how at a handbrake you get just a little bit elevated here, and that's part of, again, I think some momentum affects that a lot of times when we create a more efficient momentum getting down towards the target. A lot of times our arm action will kind of follow suit, and that's where you can see where from this viewpoint it's going to be harder, but we kind of pointed out before, the elbow gets a little bit above the shoulder, which starts to be a little bit of a red flag. One thing also we work a lot with our guys is keeping more of a stable contact with the back foot, longer and more of the surface, I guess you would say, of the back foot on the ground, so we can drive and again use the backside more. So one of the things we notice is that when guys do get, whether it be quad dominant or some other things, they start to get onto the ball of the foot a little bit earlier than probably preferred. So as you can see here, watch the kind of heel start to come off the ground here as we start to move, down the mound right here. That heel comes up a little bit early, get onto the ball of the foot. So just think about it. If you kind of were trying to drive or push off of something, if you can feel like your weight's more over top of that ankle and a little bit more dispersed to the middle of the foot versus the ball, I think you'd probably agree you feel a little bit stronger having that type of contact and pushing and driving versus if you got a little bit on those toes and the ball of the foot. So I think a lot of that deals with, again, getting the knee out in front, quad dominant, and just some overall, proprioception as far as awareness, as far as where that is. And that's something, again, through dry reps guys work on. We have guys actually work a lot, actually barefoot or in their socks, so to get a much better feel connection about really what part of that foot is in contact with the ground, and really starting to become aware and starting to create, repetitions and more consistent driving contact through a more powerful part of the foot, so we can utilize, again, the backside a little bit better. So what I'm looking for here is a timing of when the arm is coming up into here and when the hips are moving. So as you can see, the hips are kind of moving with the shoulder. See how the back hip and that shoulder is kind of moving at the same time, which is very common. That's what we're going to see, the shoulder and the hip moving at the same time. And that's kind of what we want to work against, and that goes back to that shoulder-hip separation I talked about earlier. It's the timing of where I can get my hips to start to rotate here, but now my arm later starts to get to here, and that's the separation. We're getting kinetic energy, elastic energy kind of stored through the midsection. Kind of think of it, like I said, a spring kind of coiled up, so it's able to transfer that energy back into the upper body, shoulder rotation, arm going into forward direction. So looking, you're a little bit across your body, not too bad, like we talked about earlier. And sometimes being closed off can create that. And also a big thing we look at where guys, either if they land closed or open, it goes back to, again, this foot. If we get onto our toes too much, our momentum is going to carry us sometimes across our body where we land. We have actually some guys, they'll be the opposite, where we'll see them too much on their heel. This front toe will start to come up, and those are the guys that actually land open as far as their target line. So if we looked at your back ankle, which is our point of reference going forward, and again, this is not 100% correct, just based on where my camera angle is and everything, but gives you a little bit better perspective as far as where that foot lands. We're probably 4 to 7 inches. We're landing closed, which is not huge. It's just something could be improved a little bit, but we have guys that are much more extreme, 12, 18 inches across their body. But again, something to be mindful of. Something, again, if we can get that probably to be a little bit more efficient as far as our drive line path, obviously I think that will just be contributing overall. Front foot strike is about right here, so it's hard to see from this angle usually. Give or take a frame or two. Again, as you can see, we're a little bit open with the shoulders early. We want to be still closed right now. That front shoulder starting to open. So some timing aspect. And again, that kind of really goes back to a lot of our bottom half usage to kind of set that up as far as, kind of having that in a better, timing as far as being closed still. Going into external rotation. Everything looks good. Glove side, we still see out in front. And what you can see sometimes, based on anything from mobility to strength with our guys, and of course being a little bit across your body as far as landing, is that as you start to rotate, you'll see a little bit within the front knee, front hip, a little bit of movement, and that you're having to almost kind of rotate around that a little bit, as you see right here. See a little bit of that knee giving, having to swivel out. It's a little hard for this, this hip right here to kind of really get around and rotate. So some opportunity as far as being able to get a little bit better, more efficient rotation and stabilization as far as now we're seeing the angles of these front leg. So again, I can't say it's one thing. Definitely, it's probably a combination of some mobility, which we all have opportunities within. Strength at your age, very natural. We're still growing, getting stronger as far as how to apply that and be able to handle that. And again, some of our path being across our body kind of creates, I think, a little bit of inefficiency with the hip rotation and having to really work to get around that front side post leg. Pretty good deceleration pattern again. I see early pronation happening, which we want to see right there. Nice natural arm coming through, front side shoulder down. Pretty good as far as how decelerating, kind of finishing through that process. Going into the next pitch, take the same look. And again, same things. We're going to see you start closed off as your leg gets up to the highest point. We haven't really gone anywhere with the hips yet. Our knee starts to kind of, go, go in this direction. So we're a little bit, of course, beyond our ankle area. We want to, be a little bit more back. So something we can work on, going forward there. Then just a little bit more efficient. Just there's a little bit of a hitch right here in the arm action as it kind of breaks out, and then as we start kind of really lifting up at this point, again, the momentum we're trying to create with the upper body because of the compensation to help with the the lack of, I guess you could say, lower body momentum. That elbow gets a little more elevated than I would like to say we would want to have it at. And again, it puts a little bit more of a higher risk. It just potentially what the arm is taking on from a force standpoint. This time it looks like you're a little bit actually in a straighter line. If I had to go ahead and kind of best I could put a line off that back ankle and you're going down, that's not too bad. That's a little bit better. So at this point, front foot strike is taking place. It's hard to say, a frame or two, give or take. But as you can see here, another view as far as where our hips are. Our hips are more kind of pointed here, belly button here. So not bad, but again, much more opportunity to be where our hips could be here, more in that straighter position. But again, at a timing where we're back at front foot strike, and then when our shoulders are still in a closed position, rather than, again, everything kind of rotating at the same time. We want to be able to create some of that separation eventually going forward that really starts to create the torque, the power, and the force that we're able to generate and transfer into the arm. So again, after release point, another angle of just, looking at where this leg is. We're not having, the stabilization, the straightening out yet. Which is to be expected, but that's just another viewpoint of what that front leg looks like. And again, it's an opportunity to absorb force, stabilize, and kind of convert force and energy more into a forward direction rather than the leak that that provides for most players. And the last pitch, take a look at. So again, not expecting to really see anything different, obviously. So still looking down at the ground, which again, I can't say you're not going to be able to throw strikes that way. I just like to always have my guys have pretty much an earlier lock on their target and kind of maintain that. All right, so leg lift is the highest point. Really haven't started going forward yet with the hips. This is a little bit better as far as being on point with our drive line. I think, this time we just did a little bit better job of keeping some of our weight in our direction. We start to see, even though the knee is still in a going this position, we're also starting to see how the knee starts to go forward a little bit quicker. As you can kind of see, once we start moving, why does the back knee start to go down and in? So right there, we're getting a little bit earlier and better extension off of that back leg, and that helps kind of control and dictate where our front side goes. Like I mentioned before, really we want to think about the back side kind of being the driver, really dictating where the front side goes, what it does, and as far as where the timing is. So this is probably one of the better ones as far as I'm looking at some of the different positions you're able to get into. It's really hard, like I said, to get exactly front foot strike, but I want to say it's about right there or there. It's hard to see where the foot really settles, but I think you have a little bit more as far as rotation of the hips at this point in time. We're still a little early with the upper body shoulder, glove side shoulder opening up, but I think, again, drive line is straighter. I think we got a little bit better rotation on the bottom half. Overall, I think it's a much more efficient delivery. And I think, as you can see also, as you start to come around that front side, see how that front leg is a little more stable. You don't see the knee starting to kind of go out as much. You see how the hips are able to rotate a little bit more efficiently. And probably, it's hard to say here, but I'd say that's a little bit more extension as well in that front leg. So I think, again, a lot of the things we see later in delivery, I think are really caused or influenced or dictated by things we do earlier in delivery. And I think your usage of the back leg extension and some things like that really probably contributed to later things we see that looked a little bit better within this particular pitch. Okay. So again, overall, a lot of positive things. I see a lot of good things going on, and like any player within your age and at this level, there's going to be some opportunities, especially if you haven't really been kind of aware as far as being focused on some of them specifically and trained them, such as front leg extension, a lot of different ways to use and initiate lower half center mass movement. Those aren't going to be, as efficient or as clean as they could be. But I think there's a lot of things that are good right now in place that can be really good building blocks as far as, as a foundation, and then to continue to build upon and kind of, improve upon and kind of just get more efficient, especially as you work and get older and all those other factors start coming into play. So hopefully that's a couple things for you to think about and to see a little bit different view as far as slowing it down and seeing some of your actual movement patterns yourself. What I'm also going to try to do is look for a video or two that has probably a couple MLB guys. It shows, again, different styles. We all have different styles. It's just how we get to point A and point B can be different, but really getting from point A to point B is really not negotiable when it comes to high-level throwers and being as efficient as we can within our mechanics. But hopefully they'll show some of the a better look at what it's like to get center mass hips going, what it's like to get back leg extension, front leg stabilization extension, things like that, to kind of use as another mental image as far as what, in my words, I'm speaking of, but for you to be able to see it as well. So, again, any questions, please follow up. Let me know, but hopefully this gives you a couple things to think about and be aware of, and we'll take it from there.